Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick update on my experience with the Sony SEL2470Z, priced at $1199.99. This native FE lens, which means it's a full-frame E-mount lens designed for the A7 and A7R, Sony's latest alpha cameras, which are full-frame mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras that pack 24 and 36 megapixels respectively. That is the A7 and A7R. So we're looking at the R here, which is the more expensive of the two, the 36 megapixel version, priced at $22.99 body alone. The A7 is priced at $16.99, or you can go with the kit, which offers basically a less expensive kit option to the Zeiss lens I'm looking at today for $1999.99. But this video is all about this Zeiss lens, and it's something I've been waiting a long time for, because really the potential of the A7 and the A7R is truly defined by the lens that you can throw on it. And even though there are plenty of people out there that will make the argument that the beauty of the E-mount, and this all began, of course, with the NEX lineup, which is now also part of the Alpha family, is that you can throw any piece of glass on there with an inexpensive adapter, and with Sony's peaking capabilities, you can manually focus to your heart's content. But clearly, for Sony to make the A7 and A7R a commercial or widespread success, and not only capture the pro audience that they hope to with this feature set, as well as incredible full-frame sensor capability in such a small form factor, they still had to get that mass appeal, and a lot of that has to do with, well, general overall performance, clearly, price point, and at $1,200, this lens really does command a whole nother level of investment, but it also delivers a whole nother level of actual quality and matches much of the competition, while only offering a constant f4 throughout the lens and still retaining a relatively small form factor. I mean, when you think about the fact that I've got a full frame zoom lens on my palm with body, and it fits, my hand. Granted, I don't have the largest hands in the world here. It still is making it in the palm here, and I could never do that with the Nikon equivalent that packs this 36 megapixel sensor. Basically, as I mentioned before, the overall success of the A7 and A7R are going to be, is really dependent upon the glass, and this was one of the most highly anticipated lenses, despite its price point, because the kit zoom lens was serviceable, and I think for a lot of first-time full-frame users who were stepping up from NEX, or now Alpha APS-C based mirrorless options, they were just blown away by the results even with a kit lens. On the other hand, if you're a pro and you want native lenses, or if you're just a regular consumer or an enthusiast that wants regular native lenses, the only options you had there was no zoom option, but you had your Zeiss 35 millimeter f2.8 for $799.99, the 55 f1.8 for $999.99, and then finally this one, which just launched on February 20th. Build quality is stellar. The optical quality, both for still and video so far, has blown me away. There's been quite a bit of criticism about its performance on the wide as well as long end of the spectrum of its focal range, and from what I've seen, I think those critiques are a bit unfair. Essentially, the guidelines that I feel most of those criticisms are coming from or based around is that they expect perfection because of the high price point. And I can sympathize or understand that perspective. In the same vein, I think that it has to be understood that in order to get a full-frame lens in this form factor that is able to cover 24 to 70, even with just f4, which I know again seems slow for many, take into account you have steady shot on here as well. Basically, it's an engineering feat. This may not seem anywhere near as small as those E-mount lenses that we're used to from the past, but the quality they bring with them is in another league to match a sensor that is in another league. And of course, whether or not you feel the price difference as a traditional enthusiast is worth moving up is all a matter of personal preference. But for pros, it really isn't. They need that full frame capability, not necessarily for every job, but it is, pretty much the mainstay of the industry. And Sony knew that they needed glass to match. So right now we are really limited on native FE lenses. This, in my opinion, is a complete keeper. Some people are saying that, from 28 to 60 or to 65, it's perfect, but then at the end and at the widest point, it just goes soft. And, I think copies have variation like any lens on the market. There's no question about it. But in my experience so far, the only area that I've found any shortcoming with this lens is low light performance. And that's to be expected because this is an f4 throughout its range, which for at least native options for this glass, for this mount right now in full frame capacity, is as good as we're going to do. I anticipate Sony's going to improve that with time, but for now, you're looking at the best lens option if you're looking for a zoom option natively on the E-mount format for full frame. Again, that FE designation that you see right here. And even though the lens is made in Thailand, I can assure you that Sony is the last player in the industry, despite the shakeup that's going on now internally with them. Consolidation is a more accurate term, to neglect quality control on a lens like this. So for anyone who thought that this lens was going to be a rebadged kit lens, it is in theory, yes, a upgraded kit lens, but rebadged, absolutely not. The build is completely different, the operation, the number of elements. It's not just the actual aperture being constant at f4 through, or the fact that it's got a wider focal reach going 24 to 70 as opposed to 28 to 70 with the kit glass that's priced at $500. It just outperforms it in every way. So it's a great overall balance as well for the camera. Definitely heavier than the kit glass, so it takes a little more time to get used to. But if you're moving from anything that you were working with traditionally in full frame that wasn't a mirrorless option like this, you can't complain about weight. I mean, think about it realistically. You had to carry something that made this seem like a lightweight, a featherweight in the past to accomplish this sort of flexibility. And for the enthusiast, whether on the A7 or the A7R, this is just an incredible travel lens, one that I think will live on most of your cameras, especially if you're not a pro. If you're a pro, you're going to be in love with prime lenses for this camera, specifically the 55, which eventually I hope to get my hands on. But right now I'm working with what I have. And for me, this was, in terms of my range and what I wanted to fill, this was a perfect fit. So despite the struggles at low light performance or in low light performance, this is still, in my opinion, one of the best, if not the best, lenses that I've seen for a mirrorless camera to date. And again, balance, performance, build quality, video and stills just blow me away. And I think if you get your hands on it, you will clearly agree. So while criticism is fair, it isn't a perfect lens, as I mentioned throughout the course of this video. I still think that it warrants its position. Would I have liked to have seen it at a $1,000 price point? Sure. I think the problem Sony had there is that they already have that sort of pricing for their NEX, their APS-C E-mount Zeiss glass, like the 16 to 70 millimeter, which is a great lens that's a fraction of the size of this, again, because it's not a full frame piece of glass. So inherently, the size just isn't there. And for those of you who would have liked to have seen a faster lens, just remember, it would have made this package even larger. And Sony's focus with this entire product design, in fact, the NEX lineup that's now become Alpha and now become Alpha full frame, is all about making sure the compromise stays in check, and that we don't focus too much on performance and not enough on ergonomics and comfort. This is a blend of function and design to give you the best of both worlds, and Sony is the only manufacturer being innovative enough to even create something like this, let alone preserve any sort of infrastructure or engineering design technique to maintain this entire experience throughout the range. I mean, if this was Canon, I feel like they would have just stuck giant lenses on it, which Sony kind of did at the beginning. And this is part of the growing and maturation of their entire mirrorless, forget digital imaging business. So this is a great piece of glass, if I didn't make that inherently obvious through the course of this video. Right now, my favorite, and could that change? Of course, if I get my hands on that 55 prime. But for my shooting style, I like having the flexibility, and so many of the images that I've pulled off of this pairing so far with the R specifically look like they're coming off of a prime piece of glass, and that's where Zeiss really does give you the best zoom capability for the A7 or A7R. And in terms of the lens hood, this is the last thing I'll note. It is very similar to basically all of Zeiss's zoom lens hoods that they involve or include, and I should say really Sony and Zeiss. And it's got two layers, one metallic here, which is what actually mounts onto the lens itself, and then the actual hood or the hood extension is plastic. Now, in the past, this has tended to wear and separate. Hopefully that won't be the case here. Generally, people ended up fixing that with glue. I'm not recommending that, but that's just from days past. But overall, certainly a more premium lens hood. In terms of performance, I haven't seen anything significant. The kit lens hood is basically a replica of that, less the metallic portion, in a sense. It extends and pretty much takes up the same amount of space in order to, shield and get rid of, eliminate as much flare as possible. But clearly clear difference in design between the two. But that's pretty much it. Again, the SEL2470Z, right now my favorite piece of glass for the A7R. I think if you pick it up, you're going to be happy with it because it pretty much can live on your camera. Then again, I wouldn't see why you wouldn't want to pick up some of those primes. And if you have legacy glass, well, then you may not even need this to begin with, but you probably wouldn't be watching this if that was the case. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.